The phone rang just after midnight, and within minutes the business side of professional tennis was turned upside down. On the other end of the line was Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet, a man who transformed himself from a soccer superstar into a billion-dollar global brand. Over the past decade, Ronaldo built far more than a football career. Hotels, fitness chains, fashion lines, fragrances, nutrition companies, digital media investments. The CR7 empire expanded into nearly every corner of international sports business. But there was one thing Ronaldo had never seriously attached his brand to before: professional tennis. That changed because of Alex Ila. According to multiple reports surrounding the deal, Ronaldo had quietly followed Ila's rise for months before making contact. Not just the wins, not just the rankings, the movement around her, the crowds, the emotion, the reaction from fans everywhere she played. He reportedly saw footage from Rome, where Filipino supporters transformed sections of the Italian Open into what looked more like a soccer crowd than a tennis audience. He watched clips from Roland Garros, where chants of Laban Alex echoed through Parisian courts normally known for reserved applause and quiet etiquette. Then came the statistic that reportedly grabbed his attention most. More than 40,000 fans attempting to secure French Open tickets connected to her matches despite the fact she was not a top 5 seed, not a defending champion, and not yet a Grand Slam winner. That kind of fan behavior matters deeply in modern sports business. Executives no longer look only at trophies. They look at emotional connection, audience growth, digital reach, and cultural influence. In that category, Ila was suddenly becoming one of the most interesting young athletes in the world. And then came the loss that changed everything. Her straight sets defeat against Eva Jovic at Roland Garros could have easily pushed her out of headlines. Instead, it amplified her visibility. Viral clips of Filipino fans crying in the stands spread online. Images of Ila placing her hand over her heart while thanking supporters circulated across sports media internationally. To many executives, it looked less like a defeated athlete leaving a tournament and more like the birth of a global sports personality. That is reportedly when Ronaldo made his move. Sources close to the negotiations say the first contact came directly through Ila's representation team late at night from Europe. The proposed partnership stunned people inside the tennis world because Ronaldo traditionally focused his business empire around football, fitness, hospitality, and lifestyle branding. Yet this time, the centerpiece was a 21-year-old tennis player from the Philippines who had never won a Grand Slam title and had not yet broken into the WTA Top 30. That detail became the center of debate almost immediately. Why would one of the wealthiest athletes in history reportedly offer a multi-million-dollar partnership to a player still developing her professional resume? The answer appears bigger than tennis itself. Sports marketing experts increasingly believe Ila represents something rare, a crossover athlete capable of connecting multiple international audiences at once. Southeast Asia's growing sports market, the global Filipino community, younger digital audiences, and traditional tennis fans are all engaging with her rise simultaneously. And unlike many carefully manufactured stars, her popularity appears emotional rather than corporate. Fans do not simply admire her game. They identify with her story. A young left-hander from a country with almost no history producing elite tennis stars suddenly walking onto the sport's biggest stages, carrying the expectations of millions. That narrative travels globally because it feels human, not manufactured. According to reports surrounding the agreement, Ronaldo's team saw an opportunity to position Ila not merely as an athlete ambassador, but as the face of a broader international campaign focused on resilience, ambition, and global youth culture. The reported offer, valued around $5 million, immediately triggered intense discussion across tennis circles because endorsement money at that level is usually reserved for established champions, not players still climbing toward the elite tier of the rankings. Some analysts praise the move as visionary. Others question whether the pressure attached to such visibility could become overwhelming for a young athlete still refining parts of her game. But one thing became impossible to deny. Alex Ila was no longer just a promising tennis player. She was becoming a global sports business phenomenon. And perhaps the most remarkable part of the story is this: the moment that reportedly convinced Ronaldo to act was not one of victory. It was the way she handled heartbreak in public. The quiet wave to the crowd. The tears she tried to hide. The thousands of fans who stayed after defeat just to cheer for her one more time. Because in modern sports, championships create stars. But emotional. Mallorca, Spain. May 28, 2026. 11:47 p.m. at the Rafa Nadal Academy. The courts were empty. The lights above the clay had already gone dark. Most of the players were asleep. But inside one room, Alex Ila was still awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying another painful French Open exit point by point in her mind. The loss to Eva Jovic still felt fresh. Another year at Roland Garros, ending earlier than she dreamed. Another walk off the Paris clay with cameras focused on disappointment instead of celebration. The scoreboard had read 6-4, 6-2, but the emotional weight felt much heavier than straight sets. For the third consecutive season, Ila had left Roland Garros carrying heartbreak instead of momentum. Back in Paris, the Filipino fans who transformed Court 14 into a sea of flags were already flying home. The chants of Laban Alex that echoed through the French Open grounds had faded into social media clips and cell phone videos. The emotion remained, but the tournament was over. That silence is often the hardest part for professional athletes. The crowd disappears. The adrenaline disappears. Only the questions remain. Could she have served better on breakpoint? Should she have attacked earlier in her rallies? Was the pressure beginning to affect her on the biggest stages? Tennis becomes brutally lonely after losses because there is no timeout, no teammate, no one else to absorb the blame. So Ila returned to what had always grounded her, the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca. The same red clay courts where she spent years developing her game away from headlines and global attention. Coaches there later described her mood as calm outwardly, but emotionally exhausted underneath. She practiced lightly that evening, spoke little, and disappeared into her room early. But sleep never came. Close to midnight, her phone suddenly vibrated on the nightstand. A message from her agent, Jung Yucho. "Don't go to sleep. Someone wants to talk to you." At first, Ila reportedly assumed it was another sponsor conversation or media request connected to the growing attention surrounding her rise. Since breaking into the global tennis spotlight, calls had become constant. Interview requests, brand inquiries, documentary discussions, endorsement meetings. But the next line changed everything. Someone important. Ila frowned at the screen. It was nearly midnight in Spain. Almost nobody calls athletes directly at that hour, unless something serious has happened. According to people familiar with the moment, she even asked her mother if there had been an emergency back home in the Philippines. Then the phone rang. Unknown international number. For a moment, she reportedly considered ignoring it entirely. Instead, she answered. What happened next stunned not only her team, but eventually much of the sports business world. Because the voice on the other end did not belong to a tennis executive. It belonged to Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the most famous athletes in modern history. A 5-time Ballon d'Or winner. A global business icon. A man whose CR7 empire stretched across hotels, gyms, fragrances, media, and fashion. Yet despite decades dominating world sports, Ronaldo had never seriously attached his personal brand to a professional tennis player before. And according to reports surrounding the call, he was not calling simply to congratulate her. He was calling because he believed she represented something bigger than rankings. Ronaldo reportedly told Ila he had been following her rise quietly for months. He saw the crowds in Rome. He watched Filipino fans flood stadiums in Paris. He noticed how supporters stayed after losses just to applaud her. Most importantly, he noticed something sports executives value more than statistics. Connection. In modern sports, audiences do not always fall in love with perfect champions. They connect emotionally with athletes who feel real, vulnerable, and human under pressure. Ronaldo himself understood that better than almost anyone alive. He spent decades carrying the expectations of an entire country while living under non-stop global scrutiny. And in Ila, he reportedly saw a similar emotional pull beginning to form internationally. According to sources close to the discussions, Ronaldo told her something that immediately stayed with her. "You already move people like a champion before becoming one." That line reportedly left the room completely silent. Because for weeks, much of the public conversation around Ila focused on what she had not yet achieved. No Grand Slam title. No top 20 ranking. No deep Roland Garros breakthrough. Critics pointed at weaknesses in her serve and questioned whether the hype was arriving too quickly. Ronaldo looked at something else entirely. Influence. Emotion. Presence. The ability to make people care. That midnight phone call eventually became the beginning of a reported multi-million-dollar partnership tied to Ronaldo's expanding CR7 business empire. But according to those around Ila, the money was not the part that affected her most. It was the timing. Hours after one of the most painful defeats of her season, one of the most recognizable athletes on earth personally reached out not to discuss failure, but to discuss belief. And sitting alone in her room at the Rafa Nadal Academy, long after midnight, Alex Ila realized something that changed her perspective completely. The world was starting to see her as more than a tennis player. It was beginning to see her as a global sports figure.